Hello, welcome. I'm Susan Altman, the juror for the Chip Thullbery Invitational. And I want to welcome all of you to this virtual talk on the exhibition. First of all, I want to congratulate all of the artists in the exhibition. You can see I'm here in my New York City kitchen, and I was very impressed with the high level of work that I saw in this exhibition. In fact, it was a really hard decision. So I want to congratulate and give applause to all of the artists who submitted work. There are wonderful things happening in Florida, and it's wonderful to see all of the hard work of these artists. I was impressed with the mission of the Lake Wales Arts Council to enrich the lives of all people in Central Florida, but more importantly, how a arts council really builds community, not only for the community of artists, that artists have a place to share ideas, they have a place to show each other their work, they have a place to talk about their work, but also for the greater community. If we've learned nothing from the pandemic, we have learned how important the arts are. Music, theater, dance, museums, all of them have been missed during this time. And all of them have been streamed for the public. That is what people miss. That is what enriches people's lives. And it's certainly the small arts councils around the entire country that really inspire our communities. And so I was really thrilled to be asked to be part of this exhibition and to learn a little bit about the Lake Wales Arts Council, and most importantly, to see everything that the artists have done. I am a really big supporter of arts councils. I'm active in the arts in my own community. And it's really important for not only the artists to build a community, but for the greater community. Cultural arts are one of the most important things we can bring to our communities. So in order to talk about the exhibition, I did have to choose award winners, and I will talk about those, but I wanted to give a little bit of credit to everybody. So I'm going to show you a couple of works from the exhibition. Again, I say that it was very difficult for me to choose works, but I do see some themes happening, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So one of the things that I did notice in the exhibition was the interest in still life. And we see the ring pop on the left, the center image of the dolls and the little collectible toys, as well as more traditional still life, such as flowers, that we are traditionally associate with still life. I was impressed with the scale of these. I was impressed also with the color. And one of the things that I have noticed throughout the entire exhibition is the strong interest in color among the artists. Color, mark making, line, all of that seemed to come out in these works. I also noticed the theme of having a lot of places, whether they're places you've traveled to, such as out here in Arizona, perhaps, or local places or places in the United States, or more exotic places in Europe. And perhaps that's our need to travel, since we aren't traveling at this time. But I was impressed with the fidelity that the artists have to realism, to really looking, seeing, and observing, and creating images that capture the sense of space, the sense of time, the mood of the area. Anyone who's traveled on cobblestone streets, as you can see here, we capture that sense of the exotic, the sense of the place. And that's, again, whether it's a European locale, a United States locale, something out in the country. The artists have really had an interest in that. And that was one of the themes that I noticed throughout the exhibition. I also noticed a trend towards abstraction. Now, this is actually a photograph that has been abstracted to a certain extent, probably through the use of Photoshop or other digital means. We see this abstract work, which also lends itself towards landscape, but also abstraction. And then this very loose and painterly landscape of, actually, I believe it's Italy, that captures, again, the sense of landscape with a interesting use of mark making. We see that here. We see that here in the photograph. Mark making is really that sort of loose gestural brushstroke, whether it's in a photograph and brought in through digital means, or through oil paint, or through acrylic, or through drawing. We see a real interest in mark making in all of these works. We also saw an interest in sculpture, whether it's found sculpture using things that you have um, perhaps in your garage, or sewn and constructed sculpture, which is very much a part of what's going on in contemporary art today. And both of these, I think, were interesting in that way. They're different. Um, one is fabric, one is metal with the light bulb. But again, it's that interest in three-dimensionality that we see in the show as well. We also saw it in ceramic work. Photography was a big element in the exhibition. Often a lot of landscape photography, as we see in the black and white image on the left, and the color image on the right, which has this sense of wonder. Both of them, I think, capture the sky becomes the theme, and the sky becomes the topic and the subject of the work. In the black and white one, we see the sort of clouds, but on the right, we see the heavens and the universe and something greater than ourselves. And I think that's something that's evident in both of these works, whether the artist is working in black and white or in color in their photography. We also see more traditional photography of, animals that are obviously part of Florida. And we also see figurative photography where we're playing around. And I love this idea of playing with the mask, because we all know that you don't leave the house anymore without a mask. But here we're playing with different types of masks. And there's a much more mysterious feeling to it. But what does a mask say to the viewer? What does the mask say? And one of the things that I do want to stress in all of the works is that art is a product of its time. Art says something to the viewer. Art makes a statement. You have a dialogue with a work of art. It says something to the person who looks at it. And not everybody sees the same thing. We don't all have the same dialogue. And I always tell my students that, you walk into a museum or a gallery or your art center, and a work calls your name. It says, come over, look at it. And sometimes they look at me and they say, boy, my professor's a little crazy. She's telling me the art speaks to me. But art does speak to you. Art calls your name from across the room. It invites you to have a dialogue with it. It invites you to come speak to the work and to learn more about it. I always like the quote by Bernard Berenson that says, you only see what you know. And my feeling about this is my goal as a professor and as an artist is for you to see more than you know, to be open to new ideas. And one of the great things of this exhibition is that we are open to new ideas. We're seeing work that we may not understand, we may not like at first glance, but then we have a dialogue with it. We have a conversation with it. And through that conversation, something resonates with us and we look at it. So you can see here that there's work here with text. There's mixed media, and all three of these works are mixed media. We see this, a different kind of mask, and certainly a more concerning mask, the idea of using a respirator. Now, anyone who's gone through art school or who's done work, I have a respirator at home, not for germs, but I have it for when I work with difficult materials. So this captures both the medical aspect of it, the person's wearing a hat that appears that they're in a medical field, but also the idea of art and how we protect ourselves from our materials. We also saw a lot of drawing and a lot of text. This work here with arrows pointing to various places, the Florida Keys, California, New York. This is an ink drawing. It's actually quite small. It's quite wide, but quite small. I think it's about 15 by maybe 40 inches. We also see this work, which has layering of text underneath flowers. We do see a lot of text now being brought into work. So we do see that as a part of the what is going on in contemporary art practice. So let's take a look at the award winners. And again, I want to congratulate all of the artists, not just the award winners, but everyone who is willing to let work leave their studio and be open to the public, to be seen by the public and have a dialogue with the public. As I mentioned in the very beginning of my talk, this was an exceptionally hard decision to make. It was not something that was easily decided. I went back and forth. I looked through the slides many times, and really everybody in the exhibition was deserving an award, but I did have to choose several award winners. So here they go. So this work is Best in Show, and I was so impressed, first of all, by the scale, it's 24 by 30, but more importantly by the use of color. Now, one of the things that I've noticed in the work throughout the show is a strong use of color. And if you look here, it's very subtle, but there's this wonderful sense of this red here, that the shadow brings out the red in the skin tone. This bit of highlight here has a red tone to it. Over here, there's a red tone. Look at this wonderful shadow of her braids as it goes across her shoulder. There's a real sense of warmth to the skin tone in this, and as well as, using pastel to build up these layers of color. We also see a fidelity here to the form. The knee, take a look at the knee here, how the knee has really captured that bone structure underneath. One of the hardest things, I think, for figure drawers is to get the sense that there is a structure beneath the figure. I always laugh and say, a student makes what I call a Gumby arm, where there's no bones inside of it. And you really get the sense of the internal structure here, very convincingly and beautifully done in terms of the shadows, the highlights, the highlight that goes across the breast here, the highlight that hits the shoulder. I also like the fact that the figure is not directly looking at us. There's not a confrontation here, whether this figure is getting up out of bed, getting out of the bathtub. We're not really quite sure, but there's a contemplative feel of the figure. And we're not quite sure what they're thinking about, but it makes us think. And I think all art should make the viewer think. It should challenge us to think in new ways. Let's take a look at the second place work called Bird of Paradise. Now, this is a very interesting work for a number of different reasons. First of all, if we know anything about birds of paradise, they're very long, skinny plants. And I like the fact that the artist has chosen to do a horizontal orientation versus a vertical orientation. It would have been very easy to decide that you're going to do this vertically and capture that length, the height of the plant. I actually did a little research on birds of paradise. This is actually considered the most important part of the plant. And there's a subtlety of color in this one as well. If we look back to the image of the woman, there was a beautiful, subtle sense of color in that. This too has a subtle sense of color in it. And one of the things that I noticed was the bluish quality in this leaf versus the greener quality in this leaf. And if you've ever really studied birds of paradise, they do have that very sort of bluish green tinge to their leaves. There's also a beautiful sense here of the subtlety of how it goes from red to green in a very gradual way. The same thing here in this blue where it's twisted. And I'm not sure, it is slightly twisted, whether it's on its way out, it's at the end of its life as a bird of paradise, or whether it's really just those little lines and marks there. As well as here, there's a beautiful subtlety of color and a gradation of value in this that really captures the three-dimensionality of the form. You really get the sense that this part here has split open, and this part of the plant has emerged from them. And again, this shift in color, I think, is really, really critical to make this work interesting and to make the leaves separate out three-dimensionally. The third place work is Street Musician. And this one too has color and has subtleties of color, but in a different way. It's obviously a photograph. But we see the green shutters here versus the orange wall. The shadow that becomes a deep and rich orange. The figure itself with the guitar painted as an American flag, playing both the harmonica and the guitar. But what especially interests me about this work is that these two figures seem to be totally oblivious to what's going on outside the restaurant. So they're obviously inside this restaurant. They're sitting there. Maybe they're having a drink. You can see this person in the background. There's a straw and a cup. And they seem to be totally engaged in conversation. In fact, the arm of this figure, and we don't know if it's a woman or a man, echoes in many ways the arm of the musician. So it's almost as if they're in the same position. And they're gesturing. They're obviously deep in conversation, but there seems to be a sense that they're not existing in the reality of what's going on outside the restaurant. So I think that contrast between the interior space and the exterior space is done very well in this. We also see even a deeper space with a figure over here So we see really many layers of space. We see the musician outside, we see the two figures behind the window, and then we see a deeper space with the window behind it. It also has a richness of color. It's very hard, obviously, to capture in photography to get this rich orange. I'm curious to see where this restaurant is that planned their color scheme so well. There's also here the red strap of the guitar, which plays against the complementary color here of the red versus the green of the shutters, and the sort of blue jeans here, not quite as blue, perhaps, as a full complement, but the blue-orange complement at the bottom of the photograph. This, too, as in all of the work we've seen, makes us think, where is this figure? What is he singing? What's going on? Where is the area? And is he just playing to himself? Maybe there isn't a crowd outside. Maybe he's just outside the restaurant. The next two awards are the Award of Excellence. And again, as I mentioned before, this was a very hard decision for all of them. And what I like about this work, St. Lawrence, is the gestural quality of the mark making and the paint. There's a quality of layering. There's a richness of color. You can see here this green-red relationship and how it layers on top. St. Lawrence implies to me the St. Lawrence River. I don't know, again, we all bring to the viewing of art our own experiences. So that may totally not be what I see in it. It could not be the St. Lawrence at all. It could be a town in Florida. I don't really know that. But to me, it captures this sort of meandering of a river. That rivers are not straight. They meander, they move, they have tributaries. And this seems to capture that for me. I really think that the layering works in it. I also like the thickness of the paint. One of the things that often painters do is they paint very thin. They want everything really smooth. And this painting does not do that. We've got dry brush strokes here. We see the energy and gesture of the mark making of the artist. And that's actually something we've seen in a lot of the work, whether we've seen the gesture in a painting. We saw that in the flower one earlier. We saw many types of mark making within this exhibition, which I think brings a real richness to the work. And it also brings, a connection to the artist itself. Let's take a look at this one, also a winner of an Award of Excellence. This is called The Hand. And at first I looked at it and said, is that a photograph? I thought at first it was a collage. And then I looked at the dimensions. It's actually 48 inches by 36 inches, which is very large, and it's done in oil. So I like the contrast of the hand versus the crispness of the background. So we have this painter here with a very painterly mark making, really capturing the sense of the knuckles. One of the things that when I teach figure drawing, I always say, the hand, there's 3 bones in there, and you need to, or at least in this part of the finger, there are 3 bones, and you need to really capture that. And this artist has really captured that. There's also a wonderful sense of value. We see, the sense of the knuckles here. We see the side of the thumb. And then you have, this very painterly, not too loose though, but realistic approach to the hand. And then you have this very graphic geometric shapes in the background. So there's this contrast between the hand and the geometry, of the background. There's also this wonderful shadow here that casts it. So is this a severed hand? Is this thing, if you remember from TV? But there is this contrast between the living and then the strong geometric background. I chose 4 honorable mentions, and all of them, again, as I mentioned, are worthy of discussion and worthy of honor. This piece I really love because it goes back to Alphonse Mucha. If you know anything about the history of art and you look back at Art Nouveau paintings were often romanticized women with flowers and usually a halo, often made out of flowers, above their head. And Alphonse Mucha was one of the major artists of that period. So this harks back to that, to this sort of historical reference. But what I like is that we've taken a figure, not a romanticized female figure, but a strong, confident woman who is now, this appears to be a medical jacket. It appears that they have their beeper here or their walkie-talkie. They have a hairstyle that doesn't fit the the romanticized feminine idea of Art Nouveau, but is independent woman with hair up, looking off to the side. You've got even here, if you notice, they've got knee pads for their work, but there's a confidence to it. Where when you look back into history, it was this romanticized woman who didn't have that kind of confidence. And here, the artist has shifted our perspective on it and put a strong, confident figure in there that still has these elements of the Romantic period, the flowers. And this word, I did look it up. It is the title of the flower. So we've got flowers. We have this traditional view, but then we have this shift away from the figure to be a strong, confident figure of 2020. And the appearance that this is a figure who works in the medical field even makes it more poignant, because how we've looked at and how they've gained our respect over the past couple of months, and certainly deserve it. This honorable mention, called Extinction Forever, is also a very interesting piece. And again, we have this play of this almost skull-like vision of the bird. And then coming out of the skull is this mushroom with then smaller birds. So while extinction is forever, and when we are losing species at an alarming rate, at the same time, this piece seems to me hopeful. That out of the ruins, out of the ashes, out of the compost, we could call it, of this dead bird, new growth has occurred. So while, if the title implies one thing, I saw it as a very positive image that from the burial of this bird, we have new life growing. I like the fact that it's clay. I like the fact, and it's pretty large. It's 23 inches high. So when you're dealing with anyone who's worked in ceramics before knows the difficulty of putting all these pieces together and finding the right balance and being able to fire them. So I think that that's a very interesting element to it. The marks here on the bird's necks, the flowers, the color, the mushroom, and then the change. And we have this gloss here on the mushroom, but the change, the matte quality, and the almost that hollow eye, which takes us to this idea of death, but with regrowth and rebirth. This honorable mention was interesting because when I first looked at it, I said, oh, look, a painting. And then when I looked up closer and I actually blew it up a little bit, it actually is fabric. It's fiber art. And so what the artist has captured here is really a wonderful sense of form, of three-dimensionality, of shadow, even the little bit of shadow that's cast here under the blanket, the saddle blanket here. The grasses, how, and grass is hard to draw. If you're an artist and you're drawing grass, sometimes it looks very contrived, grass, grass, grass. We've got a couple of pieces of grasses. And the layering here of different values and different colors and even different fabric patterns, I think brings a richness to this piece. It's also pretty large. It's 53 by 54. And it's just probably about here on me. I'm about 62 inches. So I thought that was very impressive as well. If you look up close, there's different types of stitching through it, different fabric. But you can see even here, the flank of the horse here has different values. The underside of the horse, the stirrups, the bridle, where you have just this little bit of shadow here underneath the bridle. We know that it's three-dimensional, exists on the horse's face. So I think that this was really worthy of that, very interesting. I would love to see, where this goes next. What other images does this artist make? And I think that's really interesting in all of the artists. What's their next step? Where do they go from here? Here's another work, abstraction. And we did see several abstract works in this exhibition, which I was pleased to see, only because it's something that's going on in contemporary art. There actually has been a return to abstraction. There's been a return to geometrics, geometric abstraction, and a return to strong color. This one, Metrosynthesis, also feels very much like a city, roads, streets, maybe rivers, tributaries, and layering. It's a tighter painting than the other abstract work that we looked at, but still has the wonderful sense of layering. whether we're looking through almost like a gate here, where we're looking through wire into another space. So there's a lot of space happening in this. There's space here in this black area comes forward spatially versus these colors in the background here as well. So I think that that's an interesting element in this work. It also has strong color, which again is a theme that I've seen throughout all of the works that we have seen. So to sum up, first of all, I do want to thank the Lake Walls Arts Council for this opportunity. And it was really a wonderful chance to look at what's going on in contemporary practice, to see what's going on in Florida. And I want to congratulate all of the artists. But my idea for the exhibition and what I really saw was a very diverse approach to making art. And that's what art should be. We should all bring our personal experience to our practice. What do we want to say as artists? What do we want to bring to the viewer? And what is inside of us? What ideas need to come out? And one of the things that I've noticed in all of the work is that they don't seem overworked. They seem very impassioned by the artist, and they're made with a sense of intuitive mark making and structure. And I just feel like this is what comes out of them. And I know for myself in my own practice, I make work. And I make it and I send it out into the world, as you are with the Chip Thullbery Invitational, to really contribute to your community, to contribute to the arts in your community, and to really contribute to the cultural offerings of your community. I hope that all of the artists will eventually get to meet each other and talk to each other and share ideas about art making and what they do. So again, I want to thank you very much. I've enjoyed this immensely. It was a pleasure to see all of your work. I want to thank the Lake Wales Arts Council once again for this opportunity. I want to congratulate all of the artists. Keep making art. Just keep doing it. That's the most important thing you can do as an artist, is just to get in the studio and work. So thank you very much.